We've got the live stream which has commenced. Okay, so I have pleasure in opening the council meeting of the 13th February 2024 at 6 o'clock and welcome all those in attendance. Okay, the City of Vincent would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay our respects to elders past and present. I have pleasure in opening. I have no idea what that's about. Okay, so I just want to confirm I have got one apology, and that's from Councillor Ron Alexander, and I understand that we're about to be joined by Councillor Ashley Wallace, so that's good. Okay, and I note there are no councillors recorded as having leave of absence. Members of the public who are present, do any of you wish to speak? If so, please just come forward, and we ask that you state your name and the suburb in which you reside, and also the agenda item number that you're speaking on, and we are limited to 3 minutes. Okay, so yep. Yes.
Good evening, Mayor Zaman, David McLennan and councillors. Leslie Flory, 79 Sassav, Mount Hawthorn. To bring Mayor Salmon and the new councillors up to date with my situation, I have a 900mm stormwater pipe of the City of Vincent running through my property. It's a large stormwater pipe the size of the C.Y. O'Connor pipe that runs from Mundaring Weir to Kalgoorlie. The main stormwater pipe was discovered by myself. It is an active pipe, a major asset of the City of Vincent, which runs through my property to Lake Munga. On advice, I recently put my property on the market with full disclosure of the stormwater pipe and easements. Unfortunately, this was not successful. All parties who were interested in the property and those that completed a site visit declined to proceed any further due to the stormwater pipe and easements. It is worth noting that the valuation ordered by the City of Vincent by a reputable valuer says the 600mm stormwater pipe, the size which is incorrect and provided by the City of Vincent, says, in our opinion, the above mentioned easement only has minor negative impact on the subject's lot's overall marketability. I beg to differ. Putting my property on the market clearly shows the stormwater pipe and easements have a major effect on the marketability. 7 months ago, I asked the City of Vincent if they had notified other City of Vincent residents who are impacted by the stormwater pipes running through their property. At that time, the City of Vincent had not notified them. Question. I again ask, has the City of Vincent notified the other residents within the City of Vincent who have stormwater pipes running through their properties? A straightforward yes or no answer is required. It is essential that the City of Vincent be transparent and accountable and inform the residents and ratepayers of how serious this matter is. Question. Does the City of Vincent have the responsibility and duty of care to notify these residents and ratepayers? A straightforward yes or no answer is required. Question. Why is the City of Vincent not being transparent and accountable? The Department of the WAPC, West Australian Planning Commission, and the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage both abide by the Private Property Rights Charter. Question. Does the City of Vincent abide by the Property Rights Charter for Western Australia? Please provide a clear response with a yes or no answer. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions from anyone in the public gallery? Okay, please mention it.
John Visca, Chelmsford Road, North Perth. I have two questions that I'd like to ask for the council, and I can send them on as an email later on to your governance person. This is to do with Hyde Park, the shot hole borer. Now that a plan of action has been announced, how much control does the City of Vincent have in the process of what has been put forward? That's number one. And number two, what has been planned to ameliorate the park in respect of the conditions set out in the 2003 Conservation Management Plan? I spoke a couple of weeks ago at the ratepayers meeting as such and put forward a motion, but I think it's very important, and especially to know, has this been taken out of the hands of the City of Vincent, or are you working in association as such? And I think the ratepayers really need to know that, because as we've said before, this is going to have a dire effect on Vincent as such. So I will email those, and then I don't know whether you can give a bit of an answer now, but certainly I'll be waiting on a full one. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions?
Hello, Dudley Meyer, Highgate. This is about item 11.7, the bank's reserve name. I've already sent councillors an email, so I won't repeat myself with what I said on that. However, I'd like to emphasise that it's important to make it clear what the preference is of the elders group. Do they prefer a standalone name, or do they prefer co-naming? That should have been determined right at the very start. I think it's dangerous to assume that they would prefer a particular outcome. They should have been presented with both options and asked for a preferred option as well as the preferred name. The response should have been in writing in case anyone wants to put an FOI request. As I said in my email, the preference of my friend, who's an Aboriginal man who's lived in Vincent for some time, was for the park to be co-named, as he doesn't believe in rewriting history. He was involved in the installation of the Wandoulia sign or plaque that's in the park. It was put there in about 2012, initiated by the Vincent Reconciliation Group. So he knows the area. He's not just talking off the top of his head. There was a large response in support of renaming, but how much of it was just virtue signalling, which is basically for the benefit of the signaller. A number of years ago, I spoke to an Aboriginal woman. It was part of the cultural awareness training, and she raised the issue of virtue signalling. She said it really affected the outcome. It was well-meaning, and she accepted it as she wanted to keep people on side. And she's right. Renaming the park is not going to create any jobs. It's not going to get more kids to school. It's not going to improve anyone's health. It's not going to reduce domestic violence or solve any other problems. It is symbolic. And in a way, that's why I support co-naming, as it is symbolic. It symbolises two cultures recognising each other. And I use the word cultures in the loosest sense. I will not dare to presume that there's a single Aboriginal culture, just as I wouldn't presume that there's a single non-Aboriginal culture. You also need to appreciate the precedent this creates and the potential difficult position you might put members of the Aboriginal community in. If you were proposed to name Hyde Park as Bujamulling, it's a recognised name, has been known for a long time, you can imagine the ruckus that it would create because it becomes a larger area. It's a regional issue rather than as a small Vincent issue. You'll get everyone out of the woodwork. And who's going to get caught in the middle? It's the Aboriginal community. Opponents will just portray all Aboriginal people as having the same values as Senator Lydia Thorpe, and I'm not denigrating her. I actually listen to what she says. I'm just pointing out there's a diversity of views in the Aboriginal community, just as they are in the broader community. So the thing to do is to ask the elders group for their preference, not just the name. Do it respectfully, without preempting any outcomes or guiding them in a patronising or paternalistic manner, and get it in writing so that's clear and it's not based on any assumptions. One thing I'd also like to point out to council members is you've got an absolutely fantastic map on the wall there. It's got all the Aboriginal names on it. So you go there and you can see Wandoulia, that stretch of the river, you can see Hyde Park, all those areas. After the meeting, go and have a look. It's really good. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for people coming forward? Okay, so a summary of your remarks will be included in the minutes, and responses where they are required will be in the agenda of the next council meeting. Also, the items that have been mentioned in this case, it's 11.7, will be brought forward on the agenda and one of the first items to discuss. So there being no further questions, I close public question time at 6:09. Okay, so written statements were received, and I would ask that the governance manager please read these out.
I confirm that we did receive written statements from Dudley Meyer of Highgate, and a response to these will be provided in the agenda of the next meeting.
Responses to previous public questions are listed in the agenda. Okay. There are no requests for leave of absence that have been received before this meeting. Are there any requests for future leave of absence from any councillors present? Okay. We have not received any petitions, and we have not received any requests for deputations. So then we move to public confirmation of minutes. So there is a motion that the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 12th of December 2023 be confirmed. Do I have a mover for that motion? That's moved by Councillor Jonathan Hallett and seconded by Councillor Alex Castle. Okay, can I just, all those in favour? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Yes, oh, there's those ones too. Okay, and there's a second motion here that the minutes of the annual general meeting held on the 1st of February 2024 be confirmed. Do I have a mover for that motion? That's moved Councillor Nicole Wolfe and seconded Councillor Suzanne Warner. All those in favour? Okay, carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay. So I would like to make a couple of announcements or comments in relation to a couple of issues that have come up since the December meeting, so obviously it's been 2 months since then. So 2 issues which I particularly wanted to mention tonight were the announcement by the state government that we would finally get some action on the derelict Stirling Towers. And so I first want to say how pleased I am to see that the derelict Stirling Towers, which which was vacated of all the social housing quite some time ago, is finally looking to get redeveloped. As someone who lives in that local area, I want to say what a relief it is, not only for myself and my family, but for I think everyone around there. It's been very unfortunate that since Stirling Towers was cleared out, that it has effectively become a hub of antisocial behaviour and vandalism, and that is continues to cause considerable distress for local residents around that area, as well as the fact that it's a lost opportunity to ensure that we've got social and affordable housing in what should be a high density area. Now, with this announcement, I won't go into too much detail other than to say that there have been some discussions between the council and the state government. In this case, it's the Department of Communities that's responsible for this redevelopment, about what that actually might look like, noting that that decision is not going to be coming back to council for decision. So that is taken out of our hands. So one of the things that I've been advocating for quite strongly with the Department of Communities is to ensure that as we move forward, turning the new development into having social and affordable housing, that it's quite important that priority be given with the social and affordable housing to people with disability, most notably people with physical disability. And I'll explain why that is. People with physical disability often need to be located centrally. And the reason for that is it's easier to be able to access services, but importantly, a lot of people with physical disability have limited mobility and may not have a car. And so that means that access to public transport, to affordable Ubers and taxis becomes really quite critical. And so I have been calling on the Department of Communities when they are looking at this development to see if they can prioritise a special build that will ensure that there is a larger number of accommodation options that are available for people with particular physical disability. I also want to point out that this is an important move as well in terms of addressing issues of density, because we already know that there's going to be quite a lot of apartments, and that's welcome on this site. But what it means is that people who are less likely to have cars means that you're able to reinvest that money that would otherwise go into additional parking spots into upgrades of those particular areas, those particular apartments. And that helps with issues of ensuring that we don't increase unhelpfully too much in terms of congestion around the area as well. So I think moving forward, the City of Vincent has indicated a very strong commitment to ensuring that our areas are as accessible as possible, and this is a priority for us. And we want to see the Department of Communities also recognising the importance of this and working in conjunction with the council to ensure that we can create best practice accessibility in these areas when we have social and community housing. So I look forward to continuing to have very productive discussions with the Department of Communities to try to ensure that we can get these outcomes, because I think it's positive for our city, but it's also importantly a very positive development for people with physical disability who otherwise may be left in outer suburbs and fairly stranded. And that's something that we should be looking at. As a whole. The other issue, of course, which I'm going to make some comments on, is of course the one that we've just received a briefing on, which has been quite gutting, and that is the announcement that the Polyphagus shot hole borer has spread even further than we had hoped. So there is of course the borer was presented. We've known about the borer for a while in the City of Vincent, but we received the news, the City of Vincent, fairly recently that unfortunately it's anticipated that it has infected a number of old, mature, much-loved trees, and that as part of an attempt to eradicate this particularly invasive species, that these trees will be heavily lopped and in some cases removed. I think it's fair to say that the community's response to this is one of devastation. And I know that talking with councillors around here, that devastation is very much shared. We love our iconic parks. We are already way down in terms of required tree canopy compared to other states, and also compared to really where it is that we should be. So this is devastating news and sends us entirely in the wrong direction in terms of what we want to see with our trees. I think it's important to note that this is now a national response, and the decisions around how to respond to this biosecurity threat are now being made nationally. So as a council, these decisions are being made, and while we are being advised of them, we are not in a position to be able to overturn any of those decisions. And we're mindful of the fact that effectively it's been taken out of our hands. Having said that, I want to acknowledge our Parks and Gardens team, who've been doing a formidably good job of trying to stay on top of what's happening with the threats, working with DPIRD, trying to ensure that we are keeping up to speed with what are the best replacement trees to look at putting in, how can we best make sure that as a council we're responding. And I also really want to give a shout out to our communications team, who even before we received the devastating news about the trees in Hyde Park being removed, had already taken it upon themselves to engage in quite extensive development of communications to our residents. It is one of those areas where we're going to, I think it will pretty much dominate a lot of what we need to be responding to as a council over the next few years. And it's really important that what we do is ensure that we are working collaboratively, taking a science-based approach to how we're going to deal with this issue, and that we keep asking the questions where we need to ask the questions, but that we remember that ultimately we need to be following the science on this. That's going to be absolutely critical. So this has affected 25 local government areas, and unfortunately, it's just devastating that we are one of them. So I did want to say that there's going to, of course, be a community meeting, which is being held by the state member for Perth. That's the Honourable John Carey, and that's going to be held on Monday, the 19th of February at 6 p.m. at the Perth Soccer Club. That is not a forum that's being co-hosted with the City of Vincent. This is being run by the local state member. I intend to be there, and I understand a number of other councillors here intend to be there, as do members of the Parks and Gardening team as well. So that's going to be an opportunity for us to hear more, and also to hear the public response to this as well. In addition to all of the emails that I know I've been receiving, and I probably suspect a number of you have been as well. So I just wanted to say that, this council shares the heartbreak with the community about what is going to happen with our trees, and we will be desperately hoping that we can look to eradicate and minimise any of the damage that's going to result from this invasive pest. Thank you. Okay. So declarations of interest. I'm going to hand over to the CEO because we have received some declarations of interest.
Through you, Mayor Zaman, the declarations of interest for tonight's meeting are from Councillor Ashley Wallace, who declared a financial interest in relation to item 9.5, review of local planning policies 7.6.1 to 7.6.9 on heritage management. The extent of the interest is that the council's residential home is included on the city's heritage list, and this decision may impact the value of his property. He is not seeking approval to participate in the debate, nor to remain in the chambers, nor vote on the matter. Councillor Wallace also declared a proximity interest on item 10.1, licence to Minister for Education, use of Birdwood Square by Highgate Primary. The extent of the interest is that Councillor Wallace lives on Grant Street, which is directly between Highgate Primary and Birdwood Square. I declared an impartiality interest in relation to item 9.7, request to excise, sell and amalgamate portion of reserve 25675, number 4, adjacent to 404 Bulwer Street, West Perth. The extent of my interest is that the applicant on this item is a former colleague, but I'd like to note that I was not involved in the preparation or approval of this report. It was approved by the acting CEO in January when I was on leave. And that's all the declarations for tonight's meeting, Mayor Zaman.
Are there any further declarations that anyone wishes to make?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, I'll declare an impartiality interest on 10.1 in respect to my wife is a primary school principal for the Department of Education, and therefore I have an understanding of Department of Education issues around primary schools.
Are there any further declarations? Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I think on that basis, I'll also declare an impartiality interest as I am employed by the Education Department, noting that my employment does not relate to Highgate Primary at all.
Councillor Lafontaine.
Yes, I would declare impartiality interest as well. I'm employed with the Department of Education, but also not at Highgate Primary. Thank you.
Are there any further declarations that any councillor wishes to make? Okay. Okay, so just going to note. Councillor Warner, are there any items that you wish to discuss? Okay, Councillor Wallace, are there any items you wish to discuss?
12.1, thanks. And 9.7.
Councillor LaFontaine, are there any items you wish to discuss? Councillor Castle, are there any items you wish to discuss?
10.1 and 11.7, although they're probably already extracted.
Councillor Greer. Councillor Wolf.
9.4 and 9.6, please. Thank you.
Councillor Howlett.
Confirming the following items are proposed to be moved on block: 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, 11.1, 11.2, 11.3, 11.4, 11.5, 11.6, 12.2, 12.3, and 17.1.
So the proposal is that those items be moved on block. Is there a mover for that? Moved Councillor Castle, seconded Councillor Wallace. I just put that straight, don't I? It's procedural. So all those in favour? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Okay, so that means that the first item that we're going to go to is 11.7, outcome of community consultation on naming of Banks Reserve. Do I have a mover for this motion? Moved Councillor Castle. Do I have a seconder for this motion? Seconded by Councillor Howlett. Okay, Councillor Castle, do you wish to speak to this motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm supportive of the officer recommendation as it's written in the report. I do note the comments from the gallery and in an email that perhaps this should go back to the elders group before coming to council, but to my reading of the wording that is already built into this recommendation, says that subject to the endorsement of the Boudia Reference Group, council approves the submission. So I'm satisfied that the elder group will have an opportunity to give their opinion on the solo naming of Wandoulia as opposed to dual naming. I think that we discussed this last week, that in the context of community consultation that we have run, this is quite a high number of responses, and within that there's an overwhelming preference for a single name. On that basis, I think that it would not be paying attention or giving or respecting the views of the community if we were to propose something different. I do understand the arguments for dual naming versus the solo naming, but I think this is a fantastic opportunity for Vincent to move forward in this space. And I think we're following a clear message from our community, so I'm fully supportive.
Councillor Hallett, do you wish to speak?
Thank you. Just quickly, agree with comments by Councillor Castle. I was on the RAP working group when this was first discussed quite a while ago, and to note that it is one item that the city is involved with, along with endeavours around employment and procurement changes to support Aboriginal businesses and employment in the city. So it is a symbolic gesture, but it's also a really important way to centre the long and beautiful history of First Nations people in this area. And I'm very supportive of the single name I think the community has spoken in support of that. So I'm supportive. Thanks.
Do any other councillors wish to speak to this proposal or on this proposal rather? Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. I concur with the previous comments as well. I feel like the recommendation does provide that safety net of subject to the approval of the Elders Council. And I feel like we do need to acknowledge the overwhelming response from the community consultation, which has been extensive and, as we've heard, did have a record number of responses. So for those reasons, I'm supportive.
Do any other councillors wish to speak to this proposal? I've got some comments to make. I will note I have been a little bit in two minds about this proposal as to whether it was best to go with a dual name or whether it was best to go with the name as proposed. My reasoning for trying to think about what would be the best way forward is multifaceted. The first point is that I note that City of Vincent does actually take a lot of pride in ensuring that we are capturing our European history, as evidenced by the fact that we've got our history centre and we fund this, and there is a lot of work that we do to try to capture a lot of that history as well. And so I was thinking, well, how does this actually sit with that? The other thing that I'm always concerned about is making sure that we aren't doing things that are actually going to that's potentially going to harm the Aboriginal people within our community, mindful of how hurtful the debates around the referendum were and how much pain that actually cost. And so this is always at the forefront of my mind. And I'm also conscious that working with people who are so often othered and misrepresented, and that very often the feedback I've received, and I suppose I'm particularly thinking the work I've done with refugees on this, is how much they say, please don't do these things in my name, because we end up copying all the flack, but this is not something that we've actually asked for. I do take comfort in the fact that this is going to go back to our elders group, and I will be very heavily persuaded by that, but I do think it's disappointing that we didn't get to do that first, because I would have felt more on stronger ground if I was coming back here with a proposal that had already gone through those processes that would put my mind at ease. Like other councillors, I do note the strength of support for this from the community. And so there are people that are opposing it and did make reference to the referendum and the high vote of no. I'm going to point out that vote was not replicated in the City of Vincent. So I think that's a really important point that I do want to make. And I also note there was a strong support for dual recognition as well. Overall, overwhelmingly, people want to see Wandolia recognised, whether that be as a dual name or whether it be as a single name. So I just want to, I thought I'd at least express that, that I'm going to be supporting this motion, but I am doing it with some reservations, because I want to make sure that we're not doing anything that's inadvertently going to cause greater division. At the same time, it's so critical that we do recognise the original First Nations heritage of this land, on which we're so lucky to call home. So I look forward to getting the advice from the Elders group, and we may end up discussing this again or not. So we'll see what happens. So thank you for that. Are there any other comments that anyone wishes to make? Councillor Castle, would you like to close with discussions? Okay, I'm going to put the motion if that's okay. All those in favour? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to move to 9.4. Is there anyone who'd like to move 9.4? Okay, moved Councillor, oh, sorry, I'll say what it is, sorry. 9.4, number 25, Moir Street Perth, alterations and additions to single house unauthorised existing development. So that's moved. Councillor Wolf, is there a seconder for that? Seconded, Councillor Greer. Okay, Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. I've noticed that we seem to be receiving a number of items at council where there's reference to unauthorised works having taken place. And I think in this case, it's really disappointing the extent of unauthorised works that have taken place between 2017 and 2023. That's necessitated a lot of work from administration to come up with something that might be a workable solution, including consultations and referrals to propose a way forward. And in this instance, I'm happy to support that. But I did just want to take the opportunity to just have a broader reflection, particularly around this Brookman-Moir precinct. It is an absolute gem that we have in the city of Vincent, this really historical, unique character area. And I just wanted to underscore the importance of continued efforts and continued collaboration between the administration and the residents, not only of this precinct, but of all heritage properties and areas going forward. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to echo the contributions of Councillor Wolf, it certainly was very concerning to read the extent of the unauthorised works, but in reading that in the proposed way forward, be supporting the administration's recommendation.
Okay, would anyone else like to speak on this item? Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I agree. I think that it is always concerning when we see these items come before us that have where we are effectively granting retrospective approval. I just wondered if perhaps administration could give a brief overview of our approach in this situation, because it's something that I've certainly questioned in the past and benefited from some context around how and why we approach unauthorised development applications in this particular way.
Okay, Manager.
Thank you. Through Mayor Xamon, in this particular instance, the applicant had proposed a new development application for the front fence, as you'd be aware, and the unauthorised works were picked up over the course of that application. Specifically speaking to this precinct, we have had discussions internally now that we've adopted the amended or the new Brookman-Moir precinct policy, that there is a lot of work that we need to do about information on what you can do with your heritage property. And we're working with our strategic teams to get that information out. Now that the community is definitely aware of this policy, the changes that have recently been made, and now what they can and can't do, the approvals process, and that general process. In terms of our compliance approach to the heritage properties, under our enforcement policy, we take the graduated response and consider enforcement options dependent on the merits of the case-by-case situation, and generally we'll utilise less severe enforcement in the first instance. So in this example, the works undertaken, the applicant was receptive to lodging a development application, so we proceeded down that route, but that may be a different approach dependent on the works undertaken on a different matter.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions in relation to this matter? Councillor Wolf, do you have any further comments you wish to make? In that case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. So we have item 9.5, and Councillor Wallace has already declared an interest and will be leaving the chamber. Thank you. Okay, so do we have a mover for item 9.5, which is review of local planning policies, policy numbers 7.6.1, 7.6.9, heritage management. Do we have a mover for this proposal? Moved, councillor Warner. Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Seconded, councillor Wolf. Councillor Warner, do you need to speak on this? Okay, councillor Warner, will you? Okay, in that case, I will put the motion. All those in favour? Okay, carried unanimously. Are we able to advise, councillor? Okay. No, he doesn't have to go out. Okay. It's all good, councillor Wallace. You're very much wanted in here. Okay, so we're going to move on to 9.6, advertising of new policy, healthy food and drink policy. So do we have a mover for that proposal? That's moved, councillor Wolf. Do you have a seconder? Seconded by councillor Warner. Councillor Wolf, would you wish to speak to this?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm really pleased to see this draft moving forward, potentially for consultation. I think that the consultation draft takes a really balanced approach, not only in terms of sort of that balance between promotion and limitation or restriction, but also in terms of the scope of the policy. I did want to take this opportunity just to provide some feedback that I've received to administration. And I think there are two parts to this to show that there is already a lot of really good work being done in this area. The first piece of feedback was from some young families in Vincent, really highlighting that the availability of healthy food choices for children in our city buildings, such as Beatty Park being one primary example, has been really well received and encourages young families and parents to continually attend those venues. I also noted that in the policy draft, there's not just a reference to healthy food, but other types of appropriateness in terms of our food choices. And one of those went to the cultural appropriateness of the food being offered. And I just wanted to note that at the citizenship ceremony that we had in January, where we had new citizens from 28 countries being represented, there was consistent feedback that night after the ceremony that the food on offer it felt like it was being tailored to somehow each of the individual cultural groups that were there. So I wanted to pass that feedback on and acknowledge that. But look, I think there's still more that can be done. We can still make further improvements, and I look forward to seeing what the community feedback is on the proposed draft. Thanks.
Councillor Warner. Do any other councillors want to make any comments in relation to this? Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to also acknowledge I really appreciate in this policy that it is very high level and that it does just talk about the catch-all of healthy food and drink, and does acknowledge that as we move forward, that for some people, what is healthy for one person is not healthy or suitable for another. And I really appreciate that we're taking that broad perspective, not just the standard food pyramid approach in this contribution, to acknowledge that everyone in our community can make the best choice available for them.
Does anyone else want to make any comments in relation to this item? I'd like to make some comments. I've noticed that there's been a little bit of public feedback on this where people who really haven't checked out the policy, perhaps not in Vincent, the city of Vincent, but otherwise, Talkback Radio, always fun, are perhaps really not looking at what it is we're passing. Can I just say that how wise it is? I think that we are looking at what council does and our own events and our own venues, and the fact that we are being very clear about advertising and the invidious way that advertising can impact on healthy food choices. I have to say, as a vegetarian who eats low carb, I welcome a better range of food that I'm going to potentially be able to eat. So that would be great. Are there any other comments in relation to this? Okay, Councillor Wolf, is there anything that you would like to say in conclusion? All those in favour? Okay, passed unanimously. Thank you. Okay, now we move to 9.7, a request to excise, sell and amalgamate portion of Reserve 25675 adjacent to number 404 Bulwer Street, West Perth. Okay, so do we have a mover for this? That's moved Councillor Wallace. Do we have a seconder? Okay, seconded by Councillor LaFontaine. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Mayor Simon. Look, I've moved this one, but I don't support it as written. The city's got a very well documented lack of public open space. And we also have a very well documented lack of funds to acquire further public open space to meet that shortfall. This item's somewhat unique, and I understand there's a long history of us not having access to this area, and the area it represents is a small fraction of public open space within the city of Vincent. But having said that, I can't agree with the proposal to carve off an area, however small, and hand it over to the Department of DPLH and for the benefit of a single residence to the detriment of the local community. I think that wouldn't be looking out for communities' interests in this area. We'd be giving up public open space with no direct benefit to us. So I do have an alternate on the table that I'll put forward if this one doesn't get up. Thank you.
Councillor LaFontaine. Okay, does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question. What's the practical implication of not supporting the excise?
Through the Mayor. So the affected landowner had submitted an application for fencing, and as part of that, we'd identified that the fencing encroached within the reserve, and this is the pathway that we'd identified to addressing that. If council is not supportive of the proposal tonight, then we will need to go back to the landowner and discuss options for them realigning the fence so that it's within their current property boundary, if that's possible.
Okay. I suppose my question is also, given that we don't own this land, but we hold a management order over it, what we're being asked is to relinquish the management order in relation to that particular portion. Are we actually able to enforce that? Or is it really the landowner who has the final say on excising this piece of land?
Through the chair. So in just to clarify, in order to excise a portion of the land, as we hold a management order over it from the Crown, we need to confirm to the Crown to lift the management order so that they could go about rearranging the property boundaries. If the local government didn't give consent to lift the management order and the proponent still wanted to proceed with realignment of the boundaries, there are avenues under the Land Administration Act where the minister could intervene to revoke the management order, but that would be highly unlikely. It's the advice that we've had is that they would be unlikely to use those powers, and the landowner with the fence would need to find an alternative arrangement for fencing.
Are there any other questions or comments in relation to this matter? Sorry, Councillor Warner.
Excuse me for not being so eloquent tonight. Look, I actually have no problem with this request. I really don't think there's anything for the community to gain with something that's been out of community access for over 60 years. What it is doing right now is tying up resources. So I think for what it is, for the amount of time that's passed, I'm quite comfortable in approving this. Thank you.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Mayor Simon. I certainly share the concern around the lack of public open space, particularly in the West Perth side of town. It is pretty absent without a lot of street trees, and that little reserve does provide a bit of relief, particularly if you're walking down those main roads. I did just want to confirm that it is our understanding that there is, the landowner does have some infrastructure like above and below ground that would, as they emailed through to us, is it administration's understanding that there are, I think it was aircon pipes and other things that would impact the moving of the fence?
Through the chair, that's correct. So as I understand it at the moment, and you might see from, I think it's attachment 2 or 3, the property boundary at present is right up against the dwelling, and the dwelling does have air conditioning unit and some external fixtures that have been installed that would likely be over their current boundary.
Excellent. Thank you.
Are there any further questions or comments? Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Ms. Amon. I completely agree that access to public open space is an issue within Vincent, but I don't think that this is where we're going to solve that problem. We had the advice from administration that we're looking at a reduction of public open space by 0.13% within Vincent. So it's by no means significant in terms of scale. We're absolutely not losing a portion of public open space upon which we could play sport, for example. And given that, as well as the previous lack of access, I'm also supportive of this way forward as a practical solution to this fencing issue. Thanks.
Are there any other further questions or comments in relation to this matter? I just got a couple of, want to make the comment. I have great sympathy with the concern about any loss of public space. I think that it's something that we all need to be really mindful of, and I think it's important to keep it front of mind and to keep discussing this and not just take it for granted without having a clear conversation about this. I suppose my concern is that it's not about specifically about this, but because we are all older suburbs, I think we're going to find that there is a lot of fences right around Vincent that would be subject to adverse possession or any number of concerns around boundaries that have been fenced incorrectly for decades. And so certainly as developers come in and look to assess what is their land and not, there's probably going to be more and more of these sorts of things. So I think it's really unfortunate, but I think it's fairly prevalent as well in terms of, and one of the things I suppose that did persuade me that to sort of let this one go is the fact that the City of Vincent will not see any money, even if we were to look at selling that. It does just go back to the Treasury. So it's not like we're giving up money that would otherwise belong to the ratepayers of Vincent as well. But I think it is really unfortunate. So that's just wanted to make those comments. Councillor Wallace, would you like to respond?
Yeah, sure. I had a couple of questions actually. Just with respect to the items that are installed on the side of the house that are over the current lot boundary as well, would it be open to the city not to undertake enforcement on those items if the fence line was moved and this transaction didn't go forwards?
Through the chair, just to clarify, if this doesn't proceed and and there are matters over the boundary, we would need to investigate that to confirm what is actually over the boundary and what options there might be available and if enforcement is the correct approach.
Yep, but you have the discretion not to undertake enforcement to allow those items to remain in situ.
Through the chair, that's correct. Through the city's enforcement policy, there are different avenues available to us, so we would need to see what is there and the extent of encroachment and then work with the landowner on that.
Thanks. I just had a question about my own alternate / amendment. It's titled a proposed alternate, but in the body of the document, it says proposed amendment. So I just wanted clarity whether it doesn't seem like I have support on it, but if it was to be moved, whether it would be best as an amendment or an alternate.
Through the chair.
I was going to suggest that in order to defeat the motion, I think it would be a matter of majority of people voting against it. So is what I was thinking, but I'm happy to, I'll just quickly talk with Jocelyn. Okay, so what has been suggested is put the vote, and if the vote is defeated, then we would put this motion. Is that helpful? Okay.
Yeah, thanks. I guess I'll just make a couple of concluding comments then, if that's all right. look, I understand it's a unique situation with it owned by DPLH under a management order by us, and there's a private lot owner on the other side of it. Certainly if this was an item between two private lot owners, there would definitely be some consideration paid from one to the other. I did request information on how that may occur as part of this transaction. The answer wasn't particularly fulsome, but I do presume there's some mechanism by which that would occur. The amount of that consideration, given the area, would be significant in terms of the amount of money that's currently in our POS funds, or available for spending on POS in our reserves. So on that basis, strongly urge everybody to not support this item. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Okay, so noted that it was carried with Councillor Wallace voting against. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to 10.1, licence to Minister for Education, use of Birdwood Square by Highgate Primary School. And I understand that Councillor Wallace has declared a proximity interest, and so he is leaving the room. Okay, I'm just going to, so we got this one and we got this one. Okay, first, can I have a mover for this motion, please? So moved by Councillor Hallett. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Castle. Councillor Hallett, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Zaman. I'm supportive of this motion. I guess in principle, the idea that we allow optimal use of our parks by all the community is great. I think it is important that the school children in this primary school have access to sufficient open and green space to engage in physical activity and recreation. I guess there's been some discussion, there's some questions in the last at the briefing just around, I guess, some of the terms in there. So I guess one of those is just a flag that I would like to move to amendments, and one is in relation to reciprocal use of the primary school, which I understand is not available at the moment to community use. And that's been something that has been raised previously, both on this school and other schools, when we have publicly funded sports facilities and green space available to the community, but that is cordoned off either for complete not use or I guess appears to be not available for use. So, but nothing else to say in terms of the substantive.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just debating whether I should let Councillor Hallett move his amendment. No, I'll just talk now, and then I'll talk again when he moves his amendment. I agree. I'm broadly supportive of this. I think that both we and the Department of Education have a severe lack of space, particularly our inner city primary schools that were built when there was a lot less people in the area and a lot less houses and a lot more space for them. Noting that it's always frustrating that the Department of Education don't appear to be planning for this expansion. So yes, broadly supportive of them using the space for recreation, for kids to play during school hours. And it's very important to note that it is non-exclusive use, because it is always a difficult balancing act between all of the community needs. And I certainly wouldn't be in favour of it being excluding the rest of the community for any long stretch of time, I suppose. Very interested in the amendments that are proposed to come forward, and we'll consider them when that happens. I do believe there was a discussion around an amendment on term of the lease, of the license, sorry. And I had a question whether for administration, whether that would cause an issue. I think the basis of that discussion was that 10 years is proposed as the standard term, but it's also based on the historical use of Birdwood Square. We're about to upgrade the toilet block and provide other passive uses of it, which may change the desire and the demand for that public open space. So my question is around the term.
So Councillor Castle, I'm going to suggest that we actually hold over that question until we see whether the other amendment is proposed,
Sure.
if that's
I'm
okay.
happy to do that.
So what I'm going to suggest at this point is that if people still want to speak on the substantive motion that is in front of us, and I'm aware that we have had circulated two potential amendments, neither of which have been amended, have been moved at this point. Okay. So Councillor Castle, had you concluded your comments in relation to the substantive motion?
Yep.
Would anyone else like to speak to the substantive motion that is in front of us? Okay. So Councillor Hallett.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the motion on the fuchsia, which is adding an additional clause to the end of the first motion, which is around mutually agreed community use of the Highgate Primary School grounds during daylight hours outside of school hours. And this is basically a request as part of the negotiations that a mutually agreed outcome is reached.
Okay, so that amendment has been moved, proposed amendment 1. Is there a seconder to the circulated amendment? So that's seconded by Councillor Castle. So just trying to think. So okay, Councillor Castle, would you like to speak to the amendment? Oh, no. You said you already had. Okay, we're going to go back to you, Councillor Hallett. So, Councillor Hallett, would you like to speak to the amendment?
Thank you. I've already essentially spoken to it in the substantive, but just I understand there's complexities around access to schools and that there is legitimate reasons for security and other reasons why we might not want the public accessing various areas of school grounds. And so thank you to administration for drafting the amendment as it is to provide some kind of flexibility around discussing what options are available.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I agree. I think we actually do have a history of these kinds of arrangements with primary schools. I believe we had a similar arrangement with Mount Hawthorn Primary School when they were using Braithwaite Park, and we had access to basketball courts or that they were not fenced off from the community. So I think, we all have recognised the lack of space for play. And so whatever we can investigate in relation to that, I would support.
Are there any other councillors who wish to speak to this amendment? Councillor Warner.
I support this, Councillor Hallett. I'm a big believer that these facilities should be shared with our community, and I could cite many examples over the years of where I've been quite frustrated where that hasn't been happening. So if this could be a step in that direction, I'd be fully supportive. Thank you.
Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. I concur with those previous comments and I'm supportive of this. I guess the only hesitation that I have at the moment is we acknowledge and understand that there are those complexities to do with public access to schools, its safety risks, etc. And my hesitation is almost imposing this without having had that opportunity to do deep consultation with the school. But I assume that the safety net there is by the mutually agreed. So there is that opportunity for that discussion. And if it is mutually agreed, then it will proceed. So on that basis, I'm happy to support.
Are there any other comments in relation to this amendment? I wish to make some comments. I want to indicate my full support for the proposed amendment. I think that when we are talking about a state government department effectively encroaching on limited green space of the city of Vincent, it's important that we do look at some sort of reciprocal arrangement for members of the community so that there can be a mutual benefit for everybody. We do know that access, particularly to Highgate Primary School, is already possible outside of hours. It's not like it's a fully fenced off with high gated community, and thank goodness for that. But it also means that there is the possibility for people to potentially be able to access those facilities. I also want to echo the concerns of Councillor Castle with my eternal frustration by the failure of the Department of Education to actually engage in systemic Western Australia-wide planning around what is required for capital works for our schools, and how exhausted I get by the fact that necessary upgrades to our public schools seem to only happen around election time and according to where it's deemed to have the highest level of potential swing vote. And I'm not suggesting that there is any one particular party that does this more than another, but it is a frustration. It's a particular frustration for inner city schools because we are required for good reason to increase the level of our density, but we simply don't have the required investment in our facilities that are already on very small footprints to be able to accommodate this, the increased need. And so we are constantly finding this pressure for space. So at the very least, this is one way, a small token that the Department of Education could potentially try to help to ensure that our schools are something that is able to provide for a broader level of the community. But I do recognise that Highgate Primary School are really under pressure with space, and they really want this. And so I support the substantive, and I also support this amendment. Councillor Hallett, is there anything you want to say in conclusion? Okay, so I'm going to move the amendment. All those in favour? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. And I just have another amendment that I'd like to move, which is on the light blue, which is in relation to the proposed toilet in Birdwood Square and bringing it to the design review panel. If I can get a seconder.
Okay, so that's moved by Councillor Hallett. That's seconded by Councillor Wolf. Councillor Hallett, do you wish to speak to your proposed amendment?
Thank you. Yes. So I guess this is just in relation to the idea that we as a city have pretty high expectations of our community around design outcomes, and building a public toilet is more than just providing some amenity for people to use a toilet. It is plonking a piece of built form in the middle of a park, a highly visible park on major intersections. And I think it's really important that we set a standard for our own facilities, and that built form reflects the expectations that we have of the community. Whilst acknowledging that we have budget restraints in that, I think that the community would expect not just a regular toilet. In terms of the design itself, I have no comment on it as it is. It looks fine to me, but I'm also not a member of the design review panel. And so rather than bringing this to a full council meeting for a decision, it would be useful to get it to the design review panel or the chair for comment, and then just get some feedback as to whether there's anything that has been missed in its preparation so far.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you. I concur with those comments. The only thing I'd add to that is if we're looking at a slightly different use of the park that these toilets will be in terms of having primary school children there, I think that's another reason to look at something that might be slightly different from the general Australian standard, or at least have that opportunity to consider. Thanks.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Mayor Zaman. Just to echo the comments made by Councillor Wolf, that if we do have an increased use expected of particularly very young children, just if the design review panel could put a very youthful lens over it, would be much appreciated. And thank you, Councillor Hallett, for moving this. I support this amendment. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to this amendment? Councillor Warner.
this might sound a little odd, but our plan to embed art into everything we do, I would really love the opportunity to have this considered in that, with that perspective as well, that we're building something. So can we also make it really artistic in a way? Look, in what way, I don't know, but to have that considered so that moving forward, all of our considerations embed art as part of all of our decision making.
Does anyone else wish to make a comment? Okay, Councillor Hallett, did you want to? Okay, so I'm going to move the amendment. All those in favour? Okay, that's passed unanimously. Thank you. So now yes. Okay, so now we're going to go back to Councillor Castle's question.
Thank you. I'll try and be more succinct this time. There was a suggestion that we could vary the term proposed to 4 years plus 3+3. And I just wanted administration's view on that proposal and whether that would cause any issues with the negotiations.
Through the chair, I believe it may cause some issues. We've negotiated with the Education Department around a 10-year term, and they've contributed some funds to the construction of this thing, so this toilet block. So we would have to go back to them and possibly start those negotiations again to come to a successful outcome about what that number may be. I mean, it's doable, but it sort of puts us back a step. And whether they contribute the same amount, given a shorter term, we'd have to discuss that with them and find out where we ended up.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just trying to think who hasn't spoken on the substantive motion yet. Okay, are there any other comments in relation to this? Okay, so I'm going to go back. Yeah, I'll go back to the mover of the now amended motion. Yes, that's right, which is Councillor Hallett. Councillor Hallett, do you wish to say anything in conclusion of the amended motion? Okay, so I'm now going to put the amended motion. All those in favour? That's passed unanimously. Okay, thank you. Can someone tell Councillor Wallace that he's welcome to come back into the chamber? Okay, so now we move to 12.1, Council Recess Period 2023-2024, receiving of items dealt with under delegated authority between 13th of December 2023 and 5th of February 2024. Do I have a mover for this proposal? Moved Councillor Wallace. Is there a seconder? Seconded Councillor LaFontaine. Councillor Wallace, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Simon. Look, apologies for not, I've just got a couple of questions really, and apologies for not bringing these up during the briefing last week. It's just around the traffic management services tender. I was just wondering if approval of that tender binds us to a particular level of spend with the winner of the tender, or whether we have discretion on that going forwards.
Through the chair, it doesn't bind us to a particular level of spend. It's an estimate of what the spend might be, and that can depend year by year, nature of work by nature of work.
Cool, thank you. I guess just flagging, I'll probably raise a CMR or NOM or something, just asking for a little bit more detail on the projected spend and how we may have the ability to deliver some of that in-house at a lower cost. But yeah, that's for another day. Thank you.
Councillor LaFontaine, do you have anything you wish to say? Okay. Are there any other, does anyone else wish to make any further comments in relation to this item? Okay, Councillor Wallace, you. Okay, so I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Okay, that's passed unanimously. Thank you. Okay. And there's no motions of previous terms. There being no further business to conduct, I thank everyone who is in attendance and on the live stream, and I close the meeting at 7:15. Thank you.